Welcome back, everyone, back to Pirate University. Hopefully you guys all had a good lunch, everybody here. You guys okay? All right, well, you can't go to sleep now. You can't get tired and slouch. Like, you got to be ready. We have a Pirate University OG in the house. I mean, this guy's the real deal. And look at all the stuff. I mean, it's unbelievable. It almost makes me look like I know what I'm doing up there. But so today we have got, once again, Analog Way has been a sponsor of ours for many, many years. And my friend Seth Teets over here has been one of our favorites over all these years.
Aww.
I will tell the quick story, and we don't have hot dogs for him today, so he's a little disappointed, but,
It's tradition.
We'll deal with it, though, The quick story is we actually demoed many different switchers. I don't know, it was a number of years back. And each person came in, they brought in their switcher, and then they looked at it funny, and they said, yeah, can you guys hook this up? We said, but it's your switcher. And inevitably, there would be something wrong, and they literally had no idea what to do with it. And we saw our friend Seth. Seth came in, he said, no, I got this. He set it all up, and he actually knew how to use it. We said, that's our guy.
I try.
And he has received several phone calls around 9 o'clock at night, right when there's a big part of a presentation coming. And he always knows the answer, and he always picks up. So ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Seth Teets.
Well, thank you very much. I am very excited to be back here live and in person for the first time in a couple of years. So we did it virtually last year, and it's really nice to be back in your place here. It does feel like coming back home, so thank you very much, Joe. So now that he says I know what I'm doing, I'm going to disappoint you for the next 60 minutes here, but I'll do my best. So just so you know, the way I operate here is I don't like to just sit up here and hear myself talk the whole time. So if you see something that doesn't make sense or that I need to elaborate on, feel free to throw a hand up, and we'll expand on that particular topic, because really the goal of today is for you all. So, what we'd like to accomplish here today is just give you an overview of what switchers Analog Way has in the marketplace, so that when you're out there and you're on different gigs and you see a box, you'll understand where it fits and why, what differentiates the different models. And then also, I want you to be able to feel comfortable to sit down in front of one of these things and do a very basic setup for a typical show. Obviously, in an hour, we don't have time to dive deep on all the different features, but we do offer a lot of different learning opportunities, particularly for our freelance friends. Both online and in-person training is available. So if you visit analogway.com, and I would encourage you to do so after today if you're interested in looking at being a V1 and operating the Analog Way gear. We have analogway.com, go to training, and there's online resources there. There's actually an 8-hour online class that you can register for free and start taking it tonight if you want to. That's really good. It's going to give you a lot of the general breakdown, vocabulary, menu trees, things of that nature, and get you prepared to do a basic show even with our flagship processors. Other resources available to you right now, as we all know, our industry took a pretty big hit the last couple of years. We've lost a lot of talent, and we're trying to grow new talent, which is, I really commend Joe and team here at putting forth this effort. It's a big effort, and it's a big investment in you all, the freelance community. Analog Way recognizes the importance of freelancers and the knowledge base out there. We have Analog Way University down in Beaufort, Georgia, which is where our U.S. headquarters is. It's a beautiful 7,000 square foot training facility that's purpose-built. Much nicer furniture than I have in my house. It's a nice place to be. We offer 3-day certification classes on the flagship series, the Aquilons down there. We are running specials right now. Basically, if you show up and you pass, it's no cost other than you getting down there. So normally it's $1,800 a seat, but for a limited time right now, we're trying to get as many video freelancers in there to get them certified on the gear. So that's just one way we're trying to give back to the industry, just like Joe and team here at Corporate Audio Video. So all that aside, we're going to go ahead. Don't worry, we're not going to stay in PowerPoint very long, but I do want to just hit a couple of high points so you understand what the heck we're talking about. You know, I don't want to just dive right into a machine and you're like, what kind of machine is this? So for those of you who are familiar with Analog Way, what we specialize in is image processors. So presentation switchers is another term for it, video wall processors. It can be called a lot of different things. But that's what Analog Way specializes in. We've been doing it for a very long time, and our current generation of product is what you see up here on the board. What we're working with today is our live Premiere series, which is our flagship. So these are the most powerful processors on the planet. What I mean by that is every input and every output on this box is 4K 60 HDR capable. There's no gotchas. If you plug in a 4K, it doesn't kill the next couple of 4K inputs or anything like that. It is a through and through 4K box. In fact, the backplane of the Aquilon is actually 8K. So it's designed for future-proofing in that as 8K connectivity becomes available, whether that be DisplayPort 1.4, HDMI 2.1, whatever it's going to be, it's just 2 thumb screws on the back of the device to pull out an input card or an output card and slide in another one. So that backplane connector is already 8K 60. So we're already ready for that next generation. The only question is, what's the industry going to decide on for that connectivity? So we're already deep in research on what that'll be. Just below the live Premiere and the lineup of Analog Way, in case you see some of these other devices out in the wild, the Alta 4K is one we just released at Infocom about a month and a half ago. Basically, it sits between the live Premiere flagship and our Midra 4K, which you'll also see in the wild, I think, very frequently here soon. They're basically 4K 60 platforms also. They're a smaller footprint, not quite as many bells and whistles as the live Premiere has, but also obviously a lesser price point. So there's going to be a lot more of those out there that you'll run into. But the nice part of it is no matter which one of these product families you happen to come across in the field, if you can run one of these, you can run all of these. So they are all built on the same WebRCS platform, which we're going to be working with for a good bit here this afternoon. So that's basically the lineup of the machines, so you understand where they fall. And what we're going to really concentrate on today is the live Premiere, the Aquilon series. So just so you understand what it is, excuse me, it's got the most layering capability on the most 4K outputs, whoops, one too many, that is out there. So I mentioned every single input, every single output is 4K 60 capable, obviously backwards compatible, so any resolution, 1080, whatever have you, will go into that. What's also cool is their customizable formats. So we don't stick you with the precise 4K resolution only. We can actually, within that bandwidth envelope, we can do cool custom resolutions. So a common one would be like an 8K by 1K LED wall. We can do that on a single input and a single output. So we can just type in 7680 by 1080, and that's just one feed to a 4K sendbox. So it's very versatile what it can do. One other really cool feature that is very useful on shows is the Dante audio feature within this box. So most every other video processor on the market today will strip the audio and forget about it. It's gone. So if you have a source where you actually need that audio, you're going to have to break that out before your video processor in most cases. So think little decimators or Aja boxes. I think Extron makes some too that'll break out the audio. Not so with the Aquilon or any of the processors now. So with the Analog Way platform, it has Dante built in. So it will allow you to de-embed or re-embed up to 8 channels of audio per input and output. So what this means for you as a video tech is you can take in all of your sources on our inputs and then quickly go into the Dante audio and drag and drop those audio channels wherever your audio team wants that. Give them the network connection, and you're done. Yes?
Video. Is that something that's going to happen or in the future? Or?
Potentially, we're not under development with Dante Video right now. We also, so Dante Video is a version of video over IP. So we have already adapted several different versions of video over IP. So we have SDVOE input and output cards. We also have SMPTE 2110 input and output capability, but not Dante Video today. Not necessarily, I mean, who knows what the future holds. That's the beautiful part about this platform, is it is very versatile, and we do take the industry feedback. So if we see a lot of things moving in a direction, our engineers do a really good job of researching that. If it's feasible within the platform, they'll implement it. So there's a huge list of features we've added since this was launched just based on feedback like that. So good question. So moving right along, we've got the backplane of the machine. I mentioned is internally it's 8K60, but you've got the input and output cards. These are field swappable. In fact, a lot of our owners of the platform have a bunch of different cards for different formats. So if my kit had had an extra card in it, it would have been handy today because we're actually going out SDI to the main to go out to everyone at home watching. But I only had my HDMI card with me today. So I know. What kind of rep am I tell you. See, Joe built me up, and now here I am. But so we do have a variety, and so you might have a show one day that's going to be predominantly SDI. Like today, we have a lot of SDI connectivity in and out. If I had had my spare cards, that would have been really handy. One nice part about our input and output cards is that while they're field swappable, they're also dumb. And what I mean by that is there's really not much on the actual input and output cards, which is nice because in the end, these are wear items. You know, you're doing shows daily, in and out, and you know the guys in the back here, they know they're constantly plugging and unplugging these devices every day, maybe 2-3 shows a day. So over time, your connector cards are really what's taking the brunt of wear in a machine. So when I say that our cards are dumb, what that means is there's not a lot to them, so it keeps the cost way down. So if you have to buy a spare card, it's not going to break the bank, and that's a really nice feature. So within the platform, we have a variety of different connector cards available. The ones that are the ones that come with the machine, and we'll take a look at the breakdown here in a minute, typically are going to be DisplayPort or HDMI or 12G SDI. So we also do offer some fiber options. If you have a show that you need to run very long distances, for instance, we can do HDMI 2.0 over fiber, which is handy if you need to have HDCP connectivity back and forth for any of your content. Or if HDCP is not a concern, 12G SDI over fiber is a great solution also. So those are all available. I'm not going to do too much on the fiber options because there's not a ton of them out there in the wild. You may come across them from time to time, but just know that they are a possibility within the platform. So we do have the fiber in and out as a possibility. So this is what they look like. And I promise you I wasn't going to walk around a whole lot, but I'm going to walk around a little bit. So I got to keep him on his toes back there. We have 2 chassis sizes within the Aqualon series. So there's a 5RU chassis, and there's also the 4RU chassis. What you see in front of you today is the 4RU chassis because I have to carry this around and it already breaks my back as it is, so I'd rather not carry the big one for no reason. But we have a couple of different models in each of the 2 chassis sizes. The only difference between the chassis sizes is we can put more horsepower, obviously, in the bigger chassis. So again, if you know how to run one, you already know the other. There's no worries about that. So with the bigger chassis, we can actually have up to 24 4K60 inputs and 20 4K60 outputs on a single chassis. So we can drive up to 120 megapixels off of a single chassis. So when we say it's the most powerful processor on the planet, we're not kidding. It really is. On the smaller of the two chassis, it's 16 in by 16 out maximum capability. The things that are standard across all machines is the Dante. So there's your Dante, both primary and backup NIC cards. That's standard feature. And another thing that's standard on both platforms is redundant power supply. So you'll notice, actually this picture is incorrect, that one doesn't exist. But on the big one, you have 3 power supplies. On the smaller one, you actually have 2 power supplies. It's N plus 1, meaning necessity plus 1 power supply. So the idea is if you're on a show and a power supply craps out on you, the other power supply takes the entire load and there's no downtime. It continues to go on. You can field swap the power supply, no problem. Same thing on the big one. It needs 2 power supplies to survive. So if you lose a power supply, the other 2 just take the whole load and you keep going. So it'll throw a warning on your control software so you know there's a problem, but the show goes on. So it's designed to be super reliable. So I got ahead of myself. We already covered the fact, the ins and the outs. So I highlighted RS4. So there's a couple models which I think is on the next 2 slides, but the RS4 is the most common of these machines out in the rental and staging world. You can pick them up on the sub-rental market. I know our friends Evolve have some who are joining us on this. Also our friends at Rentex have some. There's a bunch of them in the sub-rental market. On the 4RU, we already covered the maximum capabilities. And here's the breakdown. So you might hear different people calling it different things. So you'll hear RS1, RS2, a C model, Aquilon. What's the difference? So basically the breakdown is these down here at the bottom, the C models, those stand for configurable. And these are really intended only for the installation market. So we want to be able to be completely customizable for installation because every project is different. So we can do that by mixing and matching the proper cards for that installation. But in the rental and staging world, we needed some solid platforms that everybody knows what they are when they pick up the phone to call Evolve to subrent or whoever their favorite subrental partner is. So that's why we have the RS1, 2, 3, and 4. Those are known configurations. They all are always the same configuration. So if you pick up the phone and call and subrent an RS4, you know you've got 16 HDMI outputs, you've got this configuration on your inputs, and you can plan your show accordingly. So this brings us to the fun part, the actual playing of the toys here. So the web interface, which we're going to look at here in a few minutes, there's a couple of things that really set it apart and make it very user-friendly and also show-friendly for that matter. And what I mean by that is it's hosted directly on the device. So in a few minutes you'll see I'm browsing into the device to see that. That's wonderful because that means if you're a freelancer on the show and you bring your own laptop, you've already got our control software. You don't have to worry about, do I have that app or that executable file or program on my Mac or laptop. It is Mac and PC friendly because it's HTML5 based. So any browser can browse right into the control software. And it also makes it so you can divide your show up. And what I mean by that is you could have, if you're doing a bigger show, you can have up to 5 different computers talking to the same machine real time through a switch. So you could be running the main screens, you could be running the downstage monitors, you could be running the record feed, all from your own interface, all talking to the same machine real time. So it's very handy that way. Yeah. So let's go ahead and we'll take a look at it. And then if we have time, we'll come back at the end after questions and we'll look at the other platforms just briefly so that you understand, because you will see those out there too. Those are going to be very common on the mid-sized to smaller shows too. So, any questions so far?
I wonder, are you able to combine chassis to create greater now?
That is a very good question. Today, no. However, it is a feature that's in the roadmap, and I'm guessing it's going to be available next year. Early next year would be great, but I can't promise the time frame of it, but it is under development. That is correct. So, good question. All right. Any other questions? Nope. All right, let's dive into the fun stuff of playing with the toys here. So, what you're seeing in front of you here is my laptop. It's my browser, and I'm just browsing into the device. So, you can go right on the front panel of the device and go to Control and Network, and it'll tell you what the IP address of the machine is right there on the front panel. If it's set to defaults, it's 192.168.2.140. It's pretty common. But you can change that if you need to change that on your network. It is also DHCP compliant, so you can take a network address from a router if you choose to do it that way. But typically on shows, I don't recommend that. I think static IPs are a little bit more stable. Sometimes we do that with our integration partners, though. So once you do that, you open your browser, type in the address of the device, and voila, you've got the WebRCS up in front of you. So the layout of this interface is really straightforward. You have all of your menu structure over here on the left-hand side. You have your screens set up where you have program along the top and preview just below that. And then you have some memories and properties over here on the right-hand side. You'll notice, as soon as you pull it up, you've got your sources over here on the left-hand side, and those are thumbnails of your actual sources. So those are updated about once every 2 seconds or so through the ether, and it's incredibly helpful for the operator because at a glance, the operator knows, oh, I've got this camera shot down here, and yes, it's pointed in the right general direction. I can see the guy. So that's very helpful. Same thing with your screens too, so you can actually see where your sources are going to fall on your screen. But let's take a step back and start from the beginning. I'm not going to wipe it completely back to the beginning because then we'll lose all the feeds on the screens and you won't be able to see much, and that's kind of boring. So we did just do a little bit of setup during the lunch intermission here to get a basic setup, but I'm going to walk you through how we did that and more importantly, how you can do it for your shows. So once you log in, the very first thing you're going to want to do is go over here to the menu tree and just start with pre-configuration. So this is, if you click on that, it's going to open up some menus here. And this is telling the machine the very basics of how you're going to use this device today. So in this case, we've done a very simple setup where our two side screens are actually going through a DA. So they're just one output off of my device. I've got a secondary screen that we set up on this little guy up top, on top of the switcher. And then I have a monitoring feed for my operator's preview right here. This box, obviously, we could drive a whole bunch more screens if we wanted to. We could drive bigger screens that require multiple feeds. So big LED wall screens, for instance, where we're driving it with 2, 3, 4 outputs, whatever the case may be. Certainly soft edge blending as well. If you're doing a projection show, that would be one feed per projector to create one big canvas. So this box can quickly and easily create those canvases for you. We don't have one set up today, but I'll show you how you can do that in probably under 30 seconds. I mean, it's like, you can look like a real hero when you walk on a show set and set up an 8K LED wall and be ready to do some basic practice runs for the talent in less than 5 minutes. So it's really cool. But step one is you just go to pre-config. I like to just start at the top and work my way down. That way I know I've got everything that I need to look at. So system is the first stop. Now, if you're doing a show that has a lot of IMEG, one thing you can do is to reduce latency is gen lock or frame lock the processor to the same sync as the cameras. What that does is it eliminates the time that we have to wait for a full frame to come in. So 1 frame, in other words, 16 milliseconds. The name of the game is we want to reduce that latency as much as possible, because what you don't want is what I call the kung fu effect, like kung fu movie effect, where somebody's talking and then a half a second later they're talking on the screen. It's very distracting. So that's one thing Analog Way has always done very well, is if this machine is set up properly, you should be running at 1 frame of latency from input to output, so 16 milliseconds. And the best way to do that is either have one centralized house sync generator that you're going to feed into the Genlock input on the machine, as well as your cameras and maybe an upstream camera switcher if you have one. Or another way you can do it is if you're not going to have a house sync, you can actually sync the device directly to either your camera or camera switcher feed. That way we know we're right in time with it, and we don't have to wait that extra 16 milliseconds for the video signal to get to us. So that is done right here. You would choose, right now the default is an internal 60 hertz refresh, which is pretty standard. But if you wanted to sync it to a house sync, for instance, you would choose frame lock, and then you could choose which source you're going to frame lock it to. So you would choose either an input, and if you do choose an input, make sure that it's a stable, reliable input, and when the cameraman goes to lunch, he's not going to turn it off, because then the machine will have to revert to an internal refresh, and you'll get a blip on the screen when it does that. More safely would be a sync generator coming directly into the frame lock input. So there is a frame lock input with a loop out right on the back of the box. But if that's not a concern of yours, just leave it at internal 60 for today, and you're off to the races. The other thing you can do down here is HDCP. Anybody ever wanted to bang their head into a wall because of that 4-letter word? Okay. I see some of the veterans in here saying, yes, that was terrible, yes. So HDCP has been quite the headache ever since it came around 12, 13, 14 years ago. One thing that we build into all of our machines is the ability to turn it off on our inputs. And that's important, particularly for Macs, if you're going to have a Mac as a source. If Macs sense that our input is HDCP encrypted, it will automatically encrypt itself, which is going to pose a problem for you if you're doing a show like we're doing today, for instance, and we're going out HDMI to a little converter down there, to SDI. Whoops. Can't do that because SDI is not HDCP compliant. So suddenly our Mac would be dead in the water. What this does for you is you can just go in and quickly and easily turn off HDCP on all of your inputs in one foul swoop, and now you don't have to worry about it. If you plug a Mac in, it should sense that we're not compliant and give you your content anyways, because that's what it should do. Very good question. In theory, it should. In reality, it doesn't. And the reason for that is the DVD manufacturers, when they buy the output chips, the chips are so much cheaper if they're just hardwired for the HDCP. So most of the commercially viable DVD players out there are just going to be hardwired for HDCP. What this won't do is it won't strip it. That would be illegal and we get sued and it would be a problem. We try not to get sued too often. It just takes all the fun right out of it. So it won't strip it. There are certain test devices on the market today, not from Analog Way, but there are ways that you can test an HDMI signal and somehow HDCP goes away, but we don't mess around with that stuff. So very good question. It's really just for Macs, because Macs will toggle back and forth. So the last thing that you're going to do here, you're probably not going to run into it too often in the wild on rental and staging shows, but in the integration world, 10-bit LED walls are becoming very common. So you've probably heard the term HDR when it refers to the display technology. you need 10-bit signal path to accomplish HDR. So this machine is capable of that, as are the two little brothers to it, the Alta and the Midra 4K. It will do HDR out and in. And it'll do the cross conversion between the different color spaces, which you need to do because they're very different. And if you don't, it looks like dookie. That's the technical term for it. So we try to keep your image not looking like dookie. So that's pretty much the system. Multi-viewers, so on the back of the Aqualon series, you have your inputs, you have your outputs, and you have 2 multi-viewers for operator preview, or I don't know, if you get inventive, you can use it for a lot of different things. They are two different independent multi-view outputs. They each will allow you to have up to 64 widgets or windows on each of the 2 monitors. So they're pretty powerful monitoring outputs. You can show inputs as the way I have it laid out right now. I've got some inputs along the top, and that's handy because you can tell, oh, I've got a computer that went to sleep. You can show previews and programs for your screens. We also have countdown timers and clocks that live inside the machine that you can put on the multi-view. You can also use the countdown timers and clocks on the program screens and the aux screens as well. So that's a really cool feature as well. But these are primarily for your operator. So you can set those up. Screens, now this is where it starts to get interesting and you start to set up the machine for doing your custom show today. So step 1 is you're going to tell it the capacity of the output. And what I mean by that is you can choose if you're going to be using resolutions as we are today, which are HD, you can just leave that in the standard capacity 1 output configuration. If, however, you're going to be running a 4K display or custom in that realm of bandwidth, you need to change the capacity of your output to be capable of the higher resolution. So the way you do that is you would just click on an output, and over here you're going to select the capacity, your estimated resolution. And so, for instance, if you think it's going to be in the 4K realm on that output, I just usually select a 4K resolution and apply it. So now if you notice, the capacity on my output 6, is that me? Am I banging the mic? No. Is it? Cool, sorry. Is that better? I don't know, I'm not used to being mic'd up. It's fancy. No, it's not so great. All right, I'll try not to breathe. So that's your capacities. It really has no effect on anything other than telling the machine that it will be capable of higher resolutions. The next step is your screens. It's not me?
Can you pull it back just to the corner of your mouth a bit, just so that it's not so close to your mouth?
There we go. Is that better? Let's see. We'll give that a whirl. Either that or I'll just hold my breath the rest of the time if I start turning blue. So screens. This is where we're going to tell it. Basically, we're going to create a screen, a space, a canvas, if you will, and we're going to assign physical outputs to that space so the machine knows, hey, this output is connected to this screen. So screen 1 today, I just labeled this side screens. Pretty self-explanatory. I try to make it as explanatory as possible so when I'm in the middle of an event, I can just glance at it and be like, oh, that's my side screens output. And then small screen I have up there on top of the processor. Once you select it, you enable the output, or the screen rather, and then you just drag and drop an output to the screen. So I already had that over there, otherwise you'd just see dark screens over there. But it's just that simple. So I've applied output 1 to screen 1. My machine knows that that's there then. The last thing that you need to do, I don't know if it's, there we go. Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it.
You're an audio guy now?
Yeah, see,
Yeah.
right.
You know what I'm going to do is I'm going to reapply the tape.
Okay, go for it, man.
Excuse me.
Yeah, I
Do this.
don't need to worry about shaving.
Put it on there, like this, in the corner of your mouth, and get that thing back on.
Perfect.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yes.
All right. It's awesome when you have a team. It's great. So we've assigned the output to the screen. The last thing we need to do is assign our VPU horsepower, our video processing units. So within the device, we have either 1, 2, or 3 VPU cards. Fancy way of saying scalar cards. That's where the real horsepower of the machine lives, is on the VPU cards. So what's nice is this is a very flexible system, and we can apply the horsepower as we see fit from the VPU cards to the different screens. So you might have one screen that's really going to be heavily used for a lot of windows, for instance. So you'd move a whole bunch of your VPU layers over to that screen, and then maybe another screen, you just need one layer full screen all day long, and you don't need to worry about it. So you might even use an aux for that screen. And if you set an output up as an aux, it doesn't even touch your VPUs. So that means you're reserving all of your horsepower for your main program screens to do all your cool seamless transitions up on the big walls. And you still have your downstage monitors or your record feed or whatever it is you're using your aux for, something separate. But to apply the VPU layers, you just turn them on over here. So if we wanted to add some layers, we just select Add Layers. Now, you'll notice there's Add Layer 1, Add Layer 2. This is a question we get very frequently. And the difference is, again, capacity of the layer. So a minute ago, we talked about the capacity of an output. Is it going to be a 2K capacity or 4K capacity? The same thing applies to the layers, because if it's only going to be a 2K layer, you can actually have, if all your sources are 2K, you can have up to 48 2K layers at your disposal. The one thing I would highly suggest you keep in mind, though, is if there's any mixture of 4K in your input stable of sources, make everything 4K, because then you're not going to get confused in the middle of a show trying to drag a 4K source into a 2K layer, and it'll say out of capacity. You're like, what do you mean out of capacity? I didn't take it to screen. It's because you used a capacity 1 layer here when you're setting up your layers, when really you needed a capacity 2. So that's how that works, and I would strongly suggest using capacity 2 layers if you have any 4K sources in your show at all. Once you do that and you just hit apply, you'll now have, in this case, 6 layers at your disposal on screen 1. And they're all 4K capable. So in other words, no matter what source, no matter what somebody throws it at you, you can take it into any one of those layers on your screen. The other option you have here too is mixed layers versus split layers. And we'll take just a few seconds to talk about the difference here. So a mixed layer requires 2 scaling engines to do what's on the program screen right now, and it's got a second scaling engine that's on your preview monitor that's ready to accept whatever you're going to preview, and then when you hit take, they switch seamlessly up on your screen. So you get a true crossfade up on your screen when you do a mixed layer transition. A standalone layer says, I'm not as concerned about my transition, I need more sources to screen. So what we do is we break those 2 scalars apart and we put them both on the program screen. Now we can take twice as many sources to screen if you need a whole bunch of pip windows, but the trade-off is if you make a transition in a standalone layer, just that layer will fade off and then immediately fade back on with the next source. So it's not going to be a true seamless crossfade on screen, fade off and then fade right back on. It just fades to nothing though. It's not like you're going to see a black hole on your screen. It just goes away. Whatever was behind it is revealed and then comes back. For most people, that's still a smooth and sexy transition, and it's plenty sufficient, but it depends on your show. And that's where you can set this up. You can choose, do I want this screen to have mixed layers with, however many, or split layers with twice as many sources to screen. Not a cut, because a cut would just be a hard chop. It's going to disappear and then immediately come on. This is a more graceful, it's a fade to black and then fade right back on. Yeah, it's all, so that you can choose what that transition is. By default, it's like a half a second or a quarter second fade to black and then quarter second fade back up. Yeah, it's very fast. So for most applications, it's plenty sufficient. We'll come back to this screen in a few minutes when we have some more time at the end, and I'll show you how we would set up a multi-send unit LED wall, for instance, or soft edge blend is the exact same thing, just with overlap. So we'll come back here. But the next step is we've told the machine what the outputs are to the screens. We've told the machine how many layers we need on those screens. Then we need to tell the machine what those screens actually are. So the default here in this case was 1920 by 1080. But oftentimes, particularly if you're dealing with LED walls, maybe it's under 1920 by 1080, your LED actual resolution is. So what you can do very quickly and easily is use what we call area of interest. So you can go to output number 2 for the little screen here, for instance, and tell the machine, hey, I'm going to continue to send out an HD resolution signal, but my actual LED, let's say it's like 920 by 640 or something goofy. So now, if you notice, the screen went dark in the bottom quarter, or just in the top quarter, is because that's where our LED actually exists if that was an LED wall. So now, if we were to go back to this screen and take a look at it, you'll notice you're only seeing what is real. So you don't have to worry about it as an operator. Am I dropping this on the dead zone that doesn't exist? It's only showing you what's real. So that's a very handy and quick, easy way to set up a custom screen without affecting the resolution, which is important because some send units start to get confused if you start sending custom reses. We can do that too, but I usually prefer to keep it within a standard envelope and then use area of interest to fill that spot. So I'll go ahead and turn that off though, since we're not using a custom LED screen. And you'll notice immediately it goes back to the full raster of 1920 by 1080 on the little screen there. So very handy. Next step is inputs. Now under pre-config inputs, all it's asking you to do is to choose the capacity. So again, we're back to this capacity thing. So your inputs have a capacity, your outputs have a capacity, and your layers have a capacity. Those are your 3 main things. On the inputs, if all of your sources are 2K maximum, then just leave them all at capacity 1. You're going to leave all your layers at capacity 1, all your outputs at capacity 1. You don't have to worry about it. And you're going to have a ton of layering capability at your disposal. However, if any of your sources are going to be 4K capable and you need 4K in your show, I just suggest making all of your inputs capacity 2. It's very simple to do. You just click on, input number 1, and then you can do a shift click on input 16. Just go over here and choose 4K resolution and then hit apply. And what that'll do is now any one of my inputs on this box can accept any resolution up to 4K 60 bandwidth. And I say that because it could accept 7680 by 1080 as a source, because that's within the bandwidth of 4K, even though it's double 4K wide. So it just means now my machine is at its most dangerous. It's got every resource at its disposal. All my layers are 4K capable. My inputs are 4K capable. No matter who throws what at you 3 minutes before doors, you're going to be able to plug that in and know you can use it anywhere on your show. So I just like to do that. The other thing you can do with the devices is load still frames. So for instance, our Cavs logo that I had from last year, hopefully you haven't changed the logo in a year? Okay, good. I hate to throw up like old logos if it's the wrong one, but you can easily load still frames into the memory of the device. And that's done under library. So with library, you can just take any file from your laptop or your controlling computer and drop it into the drop images here target and upload the images. So you can actually store up to 200 4K still frames in the memory of the device, and those will be available to you during your show. There is one more step that we do that kind of separates us from the pack of other video processors, and that's this one right above it. So think of library as your mass storage, the hard drive, if you will, of the machine. And no, don't worry, it's all solid state. There's no spinning disks in there. Images, think of this as your RAM, if you will. So this is a step that we take. It's one extra step you have to set up with, meaning you have to move stuff from your library into images or your RAM, if you will. Why we do that is it then allows us to do true seamless transitions even in the non-scaled native background layer, because it's already queued up in the processor. When we move it over into the images files, that means I can, in my native background layer, I can transition seamlessly between still frames in the machine to other still frames in the machine, or to a live media server, for instance, that's coming in at the correct resolution in that native background layer. I can then transition seamlessly between even still frames and the live media server. So we don't have to then build that still frame in our preview window for 30 seconds and then take it to a screen, which on a show is an eternity. So that's why we do that extra step of library and then images. It is one extra step you have to take during your setup, but it unleashes a lot more power in the machine for your actual showtime.
Are those scalable and placeable on, as like a bug or something?
So yes, they are. That's a good question. So the library, you can bring them in at a resolution, and then you can move them into the images file, and then you can use those images in any of your scaled layers. And yes, they are scalable then. You can size and position them any way you see fit. However, if you're planning on using them in the native background layer, you want to store them, bring them in at the correct resolution for whatever you're going to drop them on, because that, if you're using them in that layer, we can't scale them. It's going to be whatever you brought it in as, needs to match what we're dropping it onto. So technically the answer to your question is yes and no. It will scale them for scaled layers, but if you're planning on using it in the native background, make sure it's the right res.
Will it do anything like drop shadow or anything like that?
Yes. So if it's in a scaled layer, on any of your scaled layers, we can do borders. So we can do shadow borders, whatever have you. But if it's in your native background, it is what it is. You're going to save it at the right resolution, and we're not going to mess with it. It's going to go into that native background layer.
Now, if I was going to use that as like a slide presentation, I was put out into a PDF, maybe the lower third, you know, just for sake of argument, put it in the lower third. How would I be able to click through or go through slides as an individual?
You wouldn't want to do that. That would be a source. Yeah, I would plug in a laptop with PowerPoint or whatever have you as one of your sources. That's where you're going to run the presentation off of. If you wanted to have another laptop to give you the lower third, you can certainly do that and then key that source over top of the background source. But I would suggest doing that in sources, not so much in the memory of the still frames. Just because you don't have that many. I mean, you have 24 if they're 2K, if you have a smaller machine. In the RS4, it's double that, so 48. So to run a presentation, you really want to run that off of PowerPoint or something like that. Cool. Any other questions? I like them, by the way. Keep them coming. I mean, it's what keeps us all on our toes. So that's your still frames. So we've pretty much set up our show at this point. Obviously, we have a very simple show today, just 2 screens and my monitoring output. So let's go ahead and start tinkering. And so to do that, we're just going to go up here to screens. And remember, we created side screens HD, and we created small screen, which is the little thing on top of that box. So the most basic functionality, and we'll go ahead and just take one layer full screen, for instance. We can move layers around as we see fit. So if we want to move layers out of the way so that we can reveal other layers behind them, we can do that. Let's say we want this pretty picture here up in that window, and we want to do a PIP. Let's take this one here and put that in a PIP. Obviously make it smaller. Everything is click and drag. So if you see something and you want to make it some other different way, you just do it. It's really intuitive. So we're going to move that up here. Let's put another, like maybe a window here just for fun. And we're going to go ahead and populate this preview screen as we see fit. And when we're happy with what we see in the preview, I'm just going to hit take, and voila, it goes to screen. So it's really that simple to create different looks on the screen. So let's say this is a look that you're going to store as a preset. You're going to use this throughout your presentation, and you want to just be able to easily recall that. So all you got to do is just go over here, click Save, and in this case, we're saving it from the program screen, because that's where I took it to. On screen 1, I can choose any unused preset here of 1,000. You have 1,000 preset slots at your disposal. Uh-oh, man. I am just, you can tell I'm a video guy, not an audio guy. Thanks, man. I appreciate your help.
The glasses don't help either.
Yeah. Well, I can ditch the glasses if they're in the way.
Wouldn't hurt.
Sure.
And then eventually get the tape.
There you go. Just, yeah.
Got a nail.
That's right. Just duct tape around the whole head. That should hold it on there. Go for it.
I was going to ask you if you still have the ability to have a shot box.
Yes. Good question. So while we're doing the mic check here, the question was, yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate your help. Do we have shot box capability? The answer is yes. So we have Analog Way offers a couple of shot boxes. There's a smaller one that just does preset recall. There's a slightly larger one that has a T-bar built into it. Those are available through Analog Way. What's new about the way they work is they plug directly into the machine if you want to. So you can just plug right into the USB port of the machine and it's ready to roll. You could also plug it into your laptop and control it over the network to the machine. That's another possibility. We are compatible with Companion and Stream Deck and just about any third-party controller out there. There are already pre-made modules for Companion for the live premiere, so those are available for free. Stream Decks are super easy and inexpensive to come by as well. So we try to make it as easy as possible to work with, and we even publish our API right on the website. So if you go to the Aquilon webpage, you can pull down what we call the third-party programmer's guide, and you can create your own API in your whatever controller you want to try out. So great question. So and you can do that. You can actually have up to 5 different auxiliary controllers in addition to 5 WebRCSs talking to the same device real time. So a total of 10 different points of control can talk to the same device real time. So very versatile.
You need a lot of fingers.
You do need a lot of fingers for that, yes. So to save a preset, it's just that simple. I usually like to do it if it's pre-show, if it's ahead of your event, I do it right there on the program. So that way you can see live on your screen without having to hit take all the time and say, okay, that's really the look I'm looking for. No, I want that source in there, or no, I want that source in there. And if I like that, then I would just go over here, hit save. From program this time of screen 1, we're gonna save that in an empty slot. We'll call this test 5, whatever, doesn't matter, and save it. You can also color code. So if you have certain presets that'll be pre-function and certain presets that'll be main show, you can color code your presets too to easily identify what that preset is for you. So there's a lot of different ways that you can make your job easier and hopefully avert confusion during the event, and it's just that easy. You can. They would show up on if you had I think the Companion, yeah. I think that would show up on the Stream Deck. The Shopbox, no, because they're not dynamic keys, they're just hard keys. But yes, on the Stream Deck. So, or anything that's got Ether. So in the installation world, it's Crestron or AMX or whoever your favorite control platform is, they would show up through the Ether. So great question. So that's how to build a preset, just that simple. And you can build up to 1,000 of those presets. You can apply, even if I made this preset over here on the program screen, I can quickly and easily apply that, for instance, to another screen, and I could hit take. Now you'll notice if I hit take right now, because screen 1 and screen 2 are selected up here, it'll change both. So if I do that, notice both screens change. But if I want to just change one screen at a time, I can quickly and easily unhighlight a screen. So screen 1 won't transition, but screen 2 will. So that's my little screen right there. So you can quickly and easily tell the machine, do I want all screens to transition or just 1 or 2 screens to transition, or however many screens you want to transition at a time. So your next question would be, well, how do I transition all my screens or multiple screens at a time? Because a lot of times in a show, you need to do a global change, right? We're going to go to lunch, so I want all my screens to go to a native background layer that's showing a countdown timer on top of it or whatever have you. So that's what the difference between a master preset and a screen preset is. A screen preset is an individual preset for one screen. And it can be applied to one screen, you can apply it to another screen, but it's just one screen at a time. A master preset, on the other hand, is a conglomeration of individual screen presets. So we can go in here and quickly and easily create a master preset. So like I would just click master and then save, and then any unused spot. If you want it to target one of your already existing screen memories, you would just use existing screen memory and then choose which screens you want to be affected. So screen 1 or screen 2 or both, and then which one of your individual screen presets to go to that screen. And it's so very simple. If I wanted it to be a dual pip look to go to screen 1, or actually let's do something a little bit more realistic. Maybe I want like the Cavs logo on screen 1, and I want the Analog Way logo on screen 2 when it comes up. So yeah, we'll call this logos and save it. And now anytime you want to go to that intermission preset, whatever you want to call it, just drag it down to either of the previews, doesn't matter, drop it, and then hit take. Now both screens transition at the identical time. And that's actually perfectly synced. So if you're doing really big shows and you need to get really creative, you can do some cool master presets to change multiple screens at the precise same time. So in other words, you can kind of build screens that have even more outputs on them than is described in here. I don't know, I'm falling deeper into the wormhole. Just know that it's important, and it's actually a really cool feature if you get into some really big screens to build with master memories that way. Any questions thus far on anything we've covered? I know I've been talking a long time. We had pizza right before, or whatever you had at home. Any questions so far? Making sense?
Quick question.
Yes.
The screen, like the multi-view,
Mm-hmm.
I noticed there was a way to do two outputs on it. Can I customize those individually?
Absolutely. Great question. I'm glad you brought that up. So if you look at the tab up here, I'm working with screens. Screens are aux. Multi-viewers are just as easy to manipulate as screens. You just select multi-viewer up here, and now I see my multi-view 1 and multi-view 2 displays. Obviously, I only have one plugged in today, this guy. But you can easily manipulate those as well. So for instance, if you want to make a layer bigger here, I can just drag and drop that. And notice that window is now bigger. I can resize and reposition. There's quick keys too, and this is true on both regular screens and multi-view screens. If you want a basic layout, you can click on this little icon up here next to the screen and say, I want a layout that is maybe 2 by 2, for instance. And it will quickly and easily create a layout that's 2 by 2. And if I want to autofill that, for instance, with sources, I could just go in here and say inputs and apply. And so now I've got inputs 1, 2, 3, and 4. 3 went to sleep over there, but you get the idea. Bad 3. Wake up. And so if I had a second multi-view, you would be seeing that now. You can apply these memories to either. So again, just by dragging and dropping. And this is really handy because you actually have 50 presets dedicated to just the multi-view. So if you're going to do the morning session and then you go to lunch and you're going to come in and do the noon session and you like a layout that's different, or maybe your show calls for a different layout, you can just call up your presets and you're ready to roll. Another handy thing is maybe, it would be a pretty big, what's that?
Show call.
Show calling, exactly.
See cameras don't care about sources too much.
Bingo, exactly. You might have a TD, exactly, who's going to be standing in the back and he only wants to see the cameras. So give him one of your 2 multi-views, give him all the cameras, and he can call his show off of his screen. So there's a ton of different uses for it. Even if you ran out of program outputs and you needed one more record feed that's going to show you, the whole screen, a big 4x 4K LED wall or something, use one of your multi-views and kick that out to your record feed at 4K 30 or 1080p or whatever you want to do. So there is a ton of power and flexibility built into this box. You can do so many different things, so many different ways. A couple other, we're down to about 15 minutes left in our time, which is very handy. I wish I had that in every one of my presentations. That way I won't run over even by the second. One thing I do want to highlight for you is we talked a little bit about custom formats. We also talked a little bit about Dante. So let's take just a quick look at where those things live in the platform too. So for Dante, obviously that would be under audio and routing. So it's super simple. You've got all of your inputs over here on the left-hand side, and you can scroll through them. So I've got my inputs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, throughout the entire box. But then at the bottom, after you exhaust the physical inputs on the box, we also have 64 channels of Dante inputs that we can mess with. So you could be, in other words, you could come in from Dante and then embed Dante channels on an output. Why that's handy? Let's say you're doing a record feed today, and on that record feed you needed a couple of channels from audio from your A1 over there. He's going to give you the record audio embedded on your video output that's then going into your recorder. And voila, you've got audio and video together. On the input side, it's also same thing. The most common use for the Dante is what we mentioned earlier, stripping your audio out and giving it to your audio guy. To do that is also just as easy. You're just going to go and scroll down beyond the physical outputs on the box, and here's my Dante outputs. So I can drag and drop, input 15, I can put all the audio from input 15 on my Dante channels 9 through 16 if I want to.
I guess that would also be better for latency.
Yeah, what's that?
It would be better for latency since you're still in the digital domain. So you're not converting until you get back to your mixer.
Correct. Yeah, we're not really doing any conversion at all. All we're doing is stripping and rerouting it someplace else. So there shouldn't be any change in the audio latency through the box at all. It's purely just routing only. So we leave all of the manipulation of your audio to your favorite DSP downstream of us. They can do.
There's probably still an analog output if you need it, right? On the back.
There is not on the Aquilon platform, but on the Midra and the Alta 4K, there is an analog output as well.
So they have both.
Yeah, they have one or two, I forget which.
I mean, they have Dante and analog.
Yes, with the small one and the mid tier, the Alta 4K, but not on the big one. The big one is purely Dante audio only, or embedded and embedded. No analog at all. All right, see? All right. That's right. So that's Dante in a nutshell. Super simple. Drag and drop. You can look like a rock star real quick by giving all your audio channels right to your audio guy and say, have a nice day. And then you're done. For the custom formats, I do want to take a quick look at this. So let's say you do need to use a custom format for a particular screen. So common application for this is, let's say we're doing a taller and more skinny LED wall. The best way to do that, if it's already outside of the 2160 tall envelope of standard 4K, would be to create a custom resolution. And I like to do that because then I can still stay within a single send unit. Let's say I'm doing a 2880 tall LED wall, but it's only 2560 wide. It's a pretty common resolution, but it's not a standard resolution. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to create it in my Formats tab. So if you look, I just went over here to Formats, and I'm going to create it. So we'll do 2560 wide, but 2880 tall. I'm going to check it to make sure that that's physically possible. So you click check, and it says, hey, warning, pixel frequency too high. Well, darn, guess we can't do it. Nope, we can do it. So that's with standard blanking, because with video signals, you got blanking on either side. That chews up the clock. That takes time. What we can do is click this button here and say reduced blanking. So now we don't have those extra sides that really aren't required in modern video. And click check. Hey, we can do it. Success. It's green. So that means I can save that. So I'm going to choose an unused memory slot over here, and I'm going to save it. So now I can apply this output resolution, 2560 by 2880, to any of my outputs. So I can just apply that to the output that's feeding the LED wall send unit. Done. Again, you look like a rock star. You can have your LED wall up and running in no time. Yes, sir.
Can you program this box to output the video without clicking anything on the web browser? Like, say, like, at a certain time you want this image to be displayed, and then further on.
So like a timeline? Short answer is no. Not within the box itself. Now, if you had an external controller, absolutely. You could easily set up an external controller to send commands however you want to do that. But there's no timeline built into the box itself.
Okay.
So, good question though. Yes, sir.
So this might be a dumb question, but if you've got a source coming in HDMI, it's sending video and audio, right? The output cards will still just send video and audio out via HDMI as well, or does it have to strictly go through Dante?
So if you've routed it that way, absolutely. So the audio routes separately from the video. So just because you've dragged and dropped that source video to that screen, it has not changed the audio. So it's a very good question. It's not a dumb question at all. We do it that way because we don't, it would be very problematic if audio always followed the video. Because think about multiple windows up on your screen and I drag a different source up into the PIP and all of a sudden, boom, my audio changes. So audio is completely separate from switching, and the audio is done down there under the Dante tab that we were looking at a minute ago, and the video is where we were dragging and dropping stuff a minute ago. So great question. Yes, sir.
So say if like your video goes down, and we're gonna have a backup. So break it in, just get that video.
So if you lost a video signal mid-show,
Video signal.
Uh-huh.
Backup.
only if you've set it up. Only if you've set it up. So if you lose a video signal, like your source dies, something like that mid-show, you're going to have to be awake at the controller because then you're going to grab another source and take it in there or just get rid of that layer or whatever have you. So good question. Yes, sir.
Quick question, I don't know if it was covered earlier, but edge blending, how many projectors can we plug in across if you want to do a really wide wall or something?
Excellent question. It depends on the machine that you're using. So if it's an RS4, for instance, extra star points if anybody remembers how many outputs is on the RS4. Right, yes, 16 is very good. So 16. So it depends on the machine because the RS1, for instance, only has 8 outputs on it, so maximum would be 8. It also depends on the capacity of the outputs, and this is a zinger too. So if all the projectors are HD, which typically I usually recommend, if you're edge blending, use HD projectors or WXGA projectors. Please don't use 4K projectors unless you need it. If there's a real application that you need all those pixels, it just makes your job so much harder to blend a 4K projector versus an HD projector. You got a lot more pixels to line up, and you know. So let's say it's HD projection, and you're running an RS4. 16. You could do a single screen with 16 HD projectors off of an RS4. If they are 4K projectors, then the maximum would be 12. And we don't have time to delve too much into it today, but I'll tell you it's because of the VPUs. Each VPU can drive up to 4 4K outputs off of that video processor internal card. So that means if all of your outputs are 4K 60, you're going to be limited to 12 4K 60 program outputs, and any remaining outputs on the box will be scaled auxes, which also are very powerful. You can do layering even on a scaled aux. We can do multiple layers on a scaled aux without touching a VPU. So it depends on the projectors and it depends on the box, but great question.
I have an easy question.
Okay.
RS stand for rental and staging.
You got it. All right, 2 gold stars for you.
RS. Humans go to RS. Stand for rental and staging.
That's right. RS, it stands for rental and staging. You got it. That's right. And C stands for configurable for our integration friends. So absolutely. All right, so we did output formats. We got 6 minutes left. So I'm going to reserve the last couple of minutes for Q&A. The other important part, if you're going to use custom formats on the output, chances are you're going to want a source to come in with that custom resolution too, so you can use it in the native background layer. Now, PCs and Macs, they don't like to do custom resolutions unless they see an EDID, electronic display identification, that gives them the authorization or that, hey, I can take that signal. So the way you can do that is you go down here to EDID. So formats is going to be applied. You're going to create the custom format here, and you can drop that onto an output. Then you're going to go to edid, and we're going to now change one of our inputs. So let's say we've got an input 13 is going to be our media server that's going to come into this tall, skinny LED wall. All I'm going to do here is go to input 13, hover over the 3 little setup dots here, click on that, and I'm going to choose a custom resolution that I already created for it. So let's say 2560 by 2880, and apply edid. Now, as soon as I do that, notice input 13's edid is now 2560 by 2880. So in theory, if you plug in your laptop or your Mac now, it's going to see 2560 by 2880, and it should automatically change its resolution to 2560 by 2880 if the laptop is capable. It's really, that's up to your laptop at that point. But we've done everything we can do now to make it possible. So super easy to apply custom formats to both outputs and inputs, which is important particularly for LED walls. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Can you write macros with this? Are you able? Hey. Hello.
We're throwing you a curveball.
Hello, check. Check. Test. Check.
That's all right. I'll repeat the question.
Are you able to write macros with it? So dynamic.
Very good question. The question is, are you able to write macros to like potentially control other devices on the network or something, or with multiple things at one time?
Yeah.
Okay. So the short answer is today, no. You're controlling this machine and this machine only from this interface. There's the RC400T is our control console, and it also today is linked to this machine. It can actually control multiple different machines. You can choose which one it's controlling on the network, but it does not have macros today either. It is something that we're keenly aware of and looking into. So, great question.
If you wanted to stream, would that be a separate device for streaming? All this?
Yep, so the follow-up question was, if you want to stream, is that a separate device outside of this device? And the answer is, on the Aquilon platform, yes. It's going to be baseband only in and out. All the different flavors we talked about possible. However, on the Alta 4K and the Midra 4K, the two little brothers to this, those machines can stream directly out of the machine. So that's a new feature that we just added in the latest firmware, to where now you can set a 720/30 stream and go out RTMP to Facebook or YouTube right in the device. It's right in the WebRCS. It would be right up here in the top right corner if I was driving one of those machines. And you can choose whether you're following program or an aux, or even your monitoring output. You could stream if you had somebody like a TD or something remote. He could see all your sources. So that's a really cool feature that is available in the Midra 4K and the Alta 4K that actually is not available in the Aquilon today. So great questions. Thank you. Yes, sir.
What operating system is running in the background?
Very good question. So the question was, what operating system is running in the background of the machine? So one very important point that I want to make right off the bat is the video path does not go through any computer equipment. It's all hardware based. It's scalar engines in and out. But obviously the GUI is running on something, right? So it's Linux. It's a Linux-based platform with proprietary OS. So it's really rock solid. There's no Windows in it, which is very important for our integration partners, because we very often get put into very sensitive environments, like the Pentagon and places like that, and they don't like Windows in their machines. So great question. We've got 1 minute left. Any other questions? It wasn't. I got the buzzer already? I still got a minute, Joe. That's right. That's right. Well, just to wrap up, I will show you. Definitely, I would highly encourage you to go to our website, take a look at our training resources. We want to help you get trained. Analog Way Academy is an excellent resource for you. The other thing that's really cool that you can do this afternoon is go to our website and download the simulators. we have offline simulators for the Aqualon and for the Midra 4K, and soon for the Alta 4K. You can download right off of our website, and you can actually set up a machine on your laptop. You can practice. You can program an entire show in the simulator, including loading your still frames, all your presets, and store the configuration file when you get on show site, push it to the machine, and you're ready to roll. So the simulators are free. They're available to anybody right on our website anytime. I highly recommend you download them and tinker on them in your free time. And by all means, take us up on the training.
All right, one question, quick.
All right, I got 5 seconds left. It's your turn.
So you're saying that if you use the simulator and create a fake show, you
Yeah.
can take that configuration, put it in a real device, and it will work.
You can.
That's
Yep.
awesome.
So if you're doing a show on the West Coast, you can program on the airplane on the way over there and load it when you get there, test.
Send somebody else a file that doesn't know what they're doing.
Bingo. Absolutely. We do a lot of remote commissionings and things like that with it. It's really, really helpful. So right on analogway.com. All right, Joe, I promised I wouldn't be late. So
Now, everybody, put your hands together for Seth, the OG of Pirate University.
thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. Thank you.
He's the best. Very good.